All right, so today we're continuing the conversation on the history of the city of Lathrop. And we have a very special guest joining us today, and that is none other than the one and only Mark Elliott. Mark, thanks for joining us on All Things Lathrop today.
No, thank you, Paul. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. And so, Mark, as we were talking a little bit before the podcast, I know you have a lot of credentials, as I would put it. You joined the city council back in 2016, spent some time serving on the planning commission, the parks and recreation commission, and then also currently as well serving on the Lathrop Manteca Fire District Board of Directors. You've coached the Junior Spartans football team for well over 20 years, I understand. And then also professionally, you're the Deputy Chief Probation Officer. And so, having said that, I guess the way I would put Mark Elliott in terms of the audience is, number one, the way I see it is you're definitely a leader, judging from all the time that you've spent in serving the community, very freely giving of your time. And then, like we said, coaching the Junior Spartans for well over 20 years on a volunteer basis. Not a paid position. And so obviously from that, I can tell that you definitely have a heart for the youth. And so having said that, take us back from the lens of the Elliott family to the early days of Lathrop. Tell us what it was like growing up in the city, when your family originally came here. And then maybe if you can, tell us what the original draw to the city was for the Elliott family.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. My dad, Alan Elliott, lifelong Lathropolian, I guess you can call us. We've been here fourth generation. And my mom, Yvonne Miller, the Elliots and the Millers, has been here since the early 1900s. So what kind of drew the Elliots and the Millers was work. The Elliots, great-grandpa Elliott, Niall Elliott, came from Wisconsin, him and his brothers. Niall and Artie and Leland, there's several Elliots, and which are also distant cousins of Brock Elliott, which is a person that
Brock Elliott School.
Brock Elliott School, and first person from Manteca to pass away, the Vietnam War. And then the Millers, William Hiram Miller, my great-grandfather, owned a store on the front, on I call it Front Street, but that's 7th Street. And it was a hardware store. And businessman, and went through the Depression and lost the hardware store. So that's kind of what brought them to Lathrop, was work. And they established their families here.
Got it. So you've been in Lathrop for about how many years?
Yeah, I'll be 55 in May.
55?
Yeah. So
that's obviously a certain long time. So obviously you remember when the city of Lathrop, officially became its own municipality in 1989. Can you tell us, or what can you tell us about the differences of Lathrop from your lens that Lathrop had before that day in 1989 where we elected to become official municipality, and then today? What were the main differences that you can see from then to now?
Well, the big thing is a town. We were under the county rules, and so we had county sheriff. If you needed help, you went to the county hospital. Naturally, you have Manteca Hospital, but it was a town, and the rules and regulations were kind of like Lathrop took care of Lathrop. If you needed help, the sheriff will be here in 20 minutes. So the community dealt with the community policing, community families were closer, I thought. Everybody kind of knew everybody in Lathrop. As we're expanding, a lot of new citizens. So there's some difficulty there. The other thing about Lathrop, which is getting better, but you went shopping. You went everywhere you went. You had to go to Stockton or Manteca. I could remember going to New Deal in Manteca was where we did our shopping. Even now, I go to Winco and Tracy. So some common issues with services, but a small town, everybody knew each other. Once we became a city, then regulations came, city council came. ordinances came. We still had the sheriff, and now, we just recently, it's been a year. It's coming up on a year of having our own, police department. So, our services are improving, but the small town feel we're having a hard time holding on to.
That's good. What would you say on that note? What would you say are some things that either the city or even us residents can do? Obviously, growth is a natural occurrence.
Yes.
Change, I guess you can say, really in a nutshell, is a natural occurrence, one, for good or for bad. But growth obviously is a good thing, is a positive thing. What do you think are some things that we can do as residents, or even maybe as a city, to foster, like you said, that close-knit community?
Well, I think one big thing that people talk about that we have plans to do is a museum. So if we knew more about our history, I know a lot of my history because of my parents, my grandparents, talking about where Lathrop came from. But if we had a museum and kind of went through the eras of Lathrop, describing how Lathrop used to be, kind of I shouldn't say a fair town, but it was a county fair mentality. People looked forward to the different festivals, going to the county fair, going to different community things. We do have some of that. July 1st is a huge thing for us, and the birthday of Lathrop, and the city has done a wonderful job keeping some of those. I can remember going to July 1st activities. Everything was free. People would come from everywhere. It's like free watermelon, free hot dogs, free cake. A big, for us, it was a big fireworks display. So, we've gotten away from that a little bit because it's so big, but still it was bringing the community together. So we're still doing a little bit of that. But I think a museum would be huge. And I just think that the city just remember the roots of where we came from, and not forgetting the other sections of our city. We have the River Islands, we have the Mossdale, we have old historic Lathrop, and I think a lot of people that's been here a while really need to work together on keeping the different sections together.
No, I definitely agree. I was having a conversation actually with our mayor, Sonny Dollywall, and he was sharing with me some of his insights into the way he looks at Lathrop. It actually was very insightful because if you look at Lathrop now, essentially you can say there's almost like three parts of Lathrop, and that is River Islands, which is west of the San Joaquin River. You have Mossdale, which is between San Joaquin River and I-5, and then everything east of I-5. And so the way he told me is, hope he doesn't mind me sharing, that's actually very insightful. The way he sort of governs, or at least looks at Lathrop, is to bring everybody up at the same time, as opposed to, some cities, I think it was Milpitas, where, parts of the city are developed, but then other parts of the city essentially become lacking. And so I think to that end, not only bringing all the city up at once in higher quality, higher standard of living, jobs and whatnot, but also fostering that sort of mindset for our residents will help, to the end that you were saying, to help to keep that connection amongst ourselves. And so that's really good. I agree with that. As far as landmarks, we're talking about the city, the history of Lathrop. As far as landmarks, one of the biggest landmarks, at least stands in my mind, and certainly, is kind of just shouting out to you as you drive by the freeway, is the Mossdale Bridge. I know we were talking before the podcast. We had an interview before Diane Harada, who's a daughter of a gentleman who developed what's currently known as Joe's Travel Plaza, but back in the day it was Tokyo Joe's. And you had mentioned, Front Street, which essentially is 7th Street, where the city of Lathrop essentially began. Prior to the city of Lathrop being called Lathrop, it was actually Wilson Station, and that was, huge, a big deal. Are there any other landmarks that you can tell us about, or any even landscapes that have certainly drastically changed from growing up here as a child to the Lathrop of today?
Well, they call it Tumbleweed City for a reason. Tumbleweed Town. If you never knew what a tumbleweed was, you do know it in Lathrop. And if you have any open land, you'll see how tumbleweeds is one thing that you'll see. LOF or best fertilizer. But one thing that you'd see no matter where you're coming from, especially the Bay Area, would be the Candy Cane smokestack that used to be here. It was a huge monument, let alone, the bridges. The bridges that have always been. But the Candy Cane smokestack I think that's an LOF or best. I'm not sure what company it is associated with, but Libby owns Ford or its best fertilizer are huge landscapes. But, Lathrop's always kind of just been known for those kind of things that I can remember as a kid. The post office is another big issue, big area. The old post office, if you go into Lathrop post office on 7th Street, you have the old post office, which is a little Mexican restaurant at one time, the historical area. But everybody met at the post office. We all had post office boxes. I have a post office box. I don't know why I pay the $180 a year, but, we're always afraid of people getting your mail or what have you. But you always met at the post office. And so even to this day, I can go to the post office and be a 30-minute time, and it's just seeing somebody I knew and catching up.
Got it. And so do you remember or do you recall what the population, I know we're talking before the podcast, and obviously Lathrop is grown certainly a lot to today, but even back when I was growing up here, came to the city in 1989 with my family, obviously you preceded that time. What was the population? Do you recall what the population of Lathrop was like growing up as a child here?
Well, between 3,500 and 4,000 probably when I, it basically Lathrop was, 5th, 6th, and 7th Street. We had Lathrop Acres, and then the rest was farmland. And then as Central Lathrop developed, which is in between 5th, 6th, and 7th Street and I-5, and, Bill Phillips built all the homes there. And so it quickly went to probably 5,500 to 6,000. But
so that was the essence of all the homes that existed.
That's what it was here. It was basically 5th, 6th, and 7th. You had Lathrop Acres, and then you had these homes up to I-5, and that was it. So we didn't have any of the Mossdales or Stonebridge or any of those areas.
Got it. If you could summarize the city of Lathrop in 3 words, what would you describe it? Even taking into account the history and maybe even today, how would you describe Lathrop?
Well, describing the people or the town?
Maybe both. How's that?
Well, the people are very prideful. On the other side of the tracks is probably going to be another description. You always compare Lathrop to Manteca and French Camp because of the schools and the rivalries. Hardworking people is probably another description. But as far as the town, hot summers. I can remember, are we going to have another 105, 106, 110 degree day? The hot summers. And then the relief of the Delta breeze. That's something that I really enjoy, is the Delta breeze, as far as remembering the summers. Winters, I remember the snow one time, but it seems like it's not going to ever snow again. But and then the other thing my parents talked about is fog. We don't know fog like it used to be. You couldn't see your hand in fog.
So it's gotten better over time.
Yeah, more cement, less fog. Yeah, less farmland, less fog. Less farmland, less fog. But they call it the Thule fog, and the fog in Lathrop was second to none, especially because we're surrounded by the river. So it would just come in super thick. My parents would talk about 20, 30 days of not seeing the sun. I mean, it was just cloudy, foggy, and very depressing. So that's how I would describe Lathrop. It's changed a lot weather-wise, a little bit.
Yeah, gotcha. So kind of going back to something that we briefly touched on earlier, I called it your credentials, but basically a lot of the different things that you've served on, the planning commission, the city council, coaching the junior Spartans football team for so many years on a volunteer basis again, and then even serving on the Lathrop Manteca Fire District Board. What would you say, whether it ties back to your upbringing or maybe just a personal drive or something that sprung up in your own heart? Where do you think that comes from, that drive to both lead and also serve at the local level? Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, well, I think it's in your blood a little bit. I mean, if you look at the rock or the memorial rock at Valverde Park, there's key people that have been on that, but everybody pitched in, everybody served. I love football, and I coach youth football, beginning with the Rebels of Manteca and the Manteca Chargers, and then the Lathrop Spartans. My kids, our family went through Pop Warner from the Saturdays, the games, to practicing every night. So it was kind of a family choice. But overall, I think most families are going to get involved, and one way is through community service. And I've kind of enjoyed seeing the town grow, and so a natural growth is to get involved with Park and Rec as your kids are young and understand that. From there would be the Planning Commission. Could you get to see what's going before the City Council, but also the future plans of Lathrop? I did 12 years of that. Learned a lot about politics and how to
Navigate.
understand. And then City Council. I never got elected. I got appointed a couple of times, but a lot of pressure there.
We still serve nonetheless.
Yeah, and then you get recruited after you're part of Lathrop.
Yeah.
You get recruited for the fire department, but it's a different goal. But you're still dealing with people, and you're still dealing with service. So
Got it.
But that's kind of a summary of why I volunteer, and all of my parents' parents have been raised that way.
Got it.
And my kids.
So that's where you say it's in the bloodline.
It's in the bloodline, and
that's good.
And I can name, I don't want to screw the names up, but
Sure.
5-10 families that are on the dedication rock that are raised the same way. Putting yourself first, putting others first and yourself second, and just being selfless. But more importantly, just being there for your neighbor. And it's a prideful town to come from. It's a lot of great people grew up in Lathrop and have really impacted the area.
Well, that's good. That's good. So you mentioned a few things. My next follow-up question was going to be, what would you say to, say a fellow Lathropian who may not have that natural ability or desire or drive, if you will, to serve and engage? What would you say to that person? Kind of going back to one of the earlier points that we were discussing early, to bring the city of Lathrop closer together, even though we're constantly growing, which is a good thing, but somehow keep that close-knit familial feeling, if you will. What would you say to that the resident that hey, this is what I did?
Well, don't grow up too fast. I think we all want services, but with services come a lot of strings attached. And I do understand the need to grow smartly, but get to know your neighbor. Be community-minded, and as we're getting bigger and bigger, it's a difficult challenge. I mean, I think a lot of towns, a lot of cities, the bigger they get, the more difficult it is. And I think it comes from the city staff, the city councils, the fire department, the schools, the boards, just all working together to keep in mind the community first. And it's difficult because everybody wants to work on their silo, but hey, how can we work together to number one, get to know each other, and number two, work on helping each other out and solving problems. But a lot of our people are commuters, and it's not anybody's fault. It's just that we need to have activities and things to bring people closer together. And I know the city's aware of it. It's just a matter of making it a priority.
Yeah, that's really good. Knowing your surroundings, knowing your neighborhood, obviously, like you said, know your neighbor. Exactly. And put your community before you put yourself.
Yes, and it's a lot of people don't grow up that way. Not that I know everybody in my street, but we've helped everybody on our street in some way, especially with the weather and everything that's kind of gone crazy with what we've gone through here this last year. But I think it's something that, small town mentality versus progress, and we've got to find a balance. And who's on city council, how people meet that balance. I'm talking about our leaders, our city manager, our police chief, our fire chief, those kind of people coming together on a regular basis, trying to keep the community. If they show it at their levels, then the community will follow it. So in other words, if our leaders are doing are really working towards that goal, I think our community will see that and follow it. And if not, our communities demand that. They need to have, look, we need to work together in this situation. And I think that's our biggest issue that's helped us as a community, is having our own agencies working together. From Lathrop Police Department to the fire department to the school systems. I think we can do a better job with Manatee Unified School District serving Lathrop and working towards keeping our kids and everybody in that community in mind.
Do you think Lathrop will ever get to the point where we have our own school district?
No, I don't, because Manatee Unified School District is really big, and they provide a lot of services. And I think it takes a lot for a city, just like it did for a city to have its own fire department. Yeah. It takes a lot for a city to have its own school district and to maintain the level of services. I'm talking special ed. I'm talking the level of
basically, it takes a lot.
It takes a tremendous amount to go away from the school district. I can remember the times when Lathrop was small and we had our own bus, we had our own this is Lathrop School. Yeah. Without the school district, and times were different. But with the numbers of people that we have, the infrastructure and what's needed, I think it'd be very difficult.
What do you to sort of dive into that a little more? What do you think are some critical elements that would make that a reality, or could make that a reality?
City leadership would have to really want to push that, and working with the school district on a plan to separate. We would need their help on how to develop our own school district, what is needed, leadership-wise, money-wise, and, just do a cost analysis. What's the positives versus the negatives? Can we afford it, number one, but what are we really going to gain versus, what are we going to lose? And, number one thing we're going to gain, just like this, with this, like the City of Lathrop's police department, is control. We're going to have one person to go to, immediate control over the City of Lathrop, and that would be probably, in my opinion, the biggest positive. But it's going to take a joint venture, and somebody's got to lead the charge. And it's kind of like it's not my area is the mentality of education, but it would take a City of Lathrop, City Council and City Manager wanting to do that. With the help of the school district, you couldn't do it as both battling, because I think no one would win there. You'd have to do it as a joint venture.
So it sounds like two main things that, at least that I'm hearing, is number one, coming together, but then also there's an overarching theme, and that's ownership.
Yes, yes. There's a lot of finger pointing on jurisdiction and so forth, but I think you've got to come together and say, is this worth the venture?
Got it. Well, I know we've covered a lot, in a short amount of time. I wanted to give you an opportunity, maybe to speak to our audience, or even our fellow Lathropians. Is there anything that you would say, anything that you just want to talk about that we may not have covered here that you feel is noteworthy, whether it's to respect of the history on this the City of Lathrop, or just to the City of Lathrop in general?
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. The idea of the City of Lathrop and coming from Lathrop is just to be prideful, get to know your neighbor, and when people make mistakes or when people fall down, just help pick them up. Forgive one another, and just be neighborly. There's going to be mistakes. People coming together is going to be difficult at times, but I'm just really happy to be a lifelong from Lathrop, and I love the small mentality of the town, and hopefully, we can continue to grow, in a positive, balanced way, with some control of who comes and takes over industry here. I don't know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's kind of what I want to say is, it's a great opportunity. But thank you for the interview.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark, for coming on. And yeah, you heard it from a local who's, like you said early on in the podcast, his grandparents that preceded him have come to the city of Lathrop in the 1900s. And so, yeah, you've definitely heard it from a local. Put your community, put your neighbor first, before yourself, both lead, but also have that servant mentality. And yeah, definitely thank you, Mark, for joining us on All Things Lathrop today. And so, if you found value in this video today, hit the like button, subscribe, share this video to a friend or to a family member, and we'll see you on the next episode of All Things Lathrop. Thank you. Take care.